Hello fight fans, I'm Michael Montero for Boxing Monthly. As you can see, the new issue is out. There's a great piece in here about Joe Smith Jr., the real breakthrough fighter of 2016, penned by my man Mark Butcher, the Butcher Man. You're watching a Neutral Corner for the week of March 11th. So what'd you think? Did you like the new intro? I put that together. I'm not great at this. My brother put together the beat. So let me know what you guys think of that actual beat. I thought it was cool. It was innovative because my brother used me hitting the speed bag. He sampled that sound and used the speed bag as the hi-hat in the beat. I thought that was cool. That was something different. I don't know anybody else who's done that. And then, all the other crap I put together with my horrible editing skills. Let me know what you guys think. Is it trash? Does it need work? Is it cool? Get at me. Let me know what's going on. Let's get into some news and notes. Okay, so the major buzzkill, and really it wasn't a buzzkill for me. It was kind of, regular news. The fight between Manny Pacquiao and Amir Khan. It's dead before it was even alive. It's off before it was even on. Apparently, the money, the reported $38 million that was being put up by quote-unquote investors from the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, has fallen through, according to Bob Arum, and it never showed up. It never materialized, not even a deposit. Go figure. I feel like we get rumors about big fights going over to that part of the world at least once a year. Never materializes. And Manny Pacquiao is one of those guys who has a million people whispering in his ear, and he always seems to fall for rumors like this, okay? This is a guy that follows the money. He's literally gotten in the car and taken a duffel bag of cash before and breached contracts to sign with another promoter because of cash handed to him, okay? He has a history of doing moves like this. Bob Arum basically said, okay, Manny, you got people saying they're going to give you money. Seek that out. Get back at me when they actually have a check and we can sign this fight and make it real. Check never materialized. So originally, Manny was supposed to fight, I believe it was on April 20th. I know it was in April, against Jeff Horn. Then it became Amir Khan. The Jeff Horn fight, to me, made sense in Australia. It would have did a pretty good rating there. It would have done good business there. I think it would have done good ratings here in America if it wasn't pay-per-view. They were briefly exploring putting it on regular TV or something like that. That fell through for this supposed Amir Khan thing, which I never was very confident in once I started hearing about the investors, quote unquote, in these dark shadows. There were no names, there were no companies listed. It was just investors. When you start to hear like blanket terms like that, there's nothing really substantial to it, right? Well, now it looks like he's probably going to fight in June or July, according to Bob Arum. So depending on how things pan out, June or July, and then November. So this whole world tour thing that we've been talking about for a while, I did a rant video on it. I was on a panel at Undisputed Champion Network for an episode of 10 Count where we talked about the world tour and all that good stuff. Turns out it's all bullshit. You can't really blame Bob Arum on this one. You can't. And I know we love to blame promoters for talking shit and lying. From everything I've heard from interviews and everything from Bob, just from his mouth, he really wanted to do this world tour thing. He really wanted to get Manny to fight. 4 times is probably a little much, but to get him to fight 3 times against lesser opponents like Jeff Horn or something like that. And then ultimately, of course, he would love for Pacquiao to fight Terrence Crawford so he could build Crawford up. Speaking of Terrence Crawford, he was just arrested for some sort of domestic issue. I don't know the details about it yet. More of that will come out. So I don't know what's going on with him, but he's just another guy that a lot of potential there, but seems to have plateaued recently. And I don't know if he's ever going to be the crossover star that Bob Arum and Top Rank are hoping for, especially if he keeps having legal issues. But for Manny Pacquiao, he's probably going to fight twice this year. Who the hell knows? Maybe he'll fight somebody in November that we care about, but you got to think the summer bout is going to be against somebody we don't. So that's what's going on with him. Speaking of networks, HBO sucks, okay? HBO just sucks. I'm just going to say it. I've defended HBO boxing a lot. I thought that 2014, 2015, they were putting up a good product. They had a bad year last year, and they are having a dismal year this year. They do have a fight coming up this Saturday that I care about. We'll talk more about that in a second. But they passed on this card that Top Rank was putting together. That's official. That's happening. Headlined by Oscar Valdez fighting Manuel Barriaga. Gilberto Ramirez is on that card. I think Jesse Magdaleno's on that card. Shakur Stevenson is making his professional debut on that card. This card makes sense for regular HBO, and Top Rank wasn't asking for a massive site fee. This would work on regular HBO. Even if you wanted to stick it on an HBO Latino, that would make a lot of sense as well, and those fights come cheap. Might have been a little higher budget than HBO Latino, but even regular HBO, man. HBO needs this. But they passed on that card. Don't know why. No real explanation given, but they passed on that card. Showtime, on the other hand, they announced that they picked up the fight between Kell Brook and Errol Spence. That's a great fight. That's a great welterweight fight that I think will be a better quality fight than the fight we saw this past Saturday, which obviously I'll talk about in a second. But Showtime picks up a card like that, and HBO balks on a pretty good card with some up-and-coming guys that are going to be, I think, stars soon. I think Oscar Valdez is a star in the making, and HBO passes on it. So Showtime continues to destroy them. And it's not even close to destroy them this year. Now, Showtime also picked up a fight that was recently announced between Andre Berto and Sean Porter. Look, I don't love that fight. They're kind of recycled guys, but I do think that at where this fight happened 4 or 5 years ago, I think Andre Berto would box circles around Sean Porter. But at the stage of his career where he's at, I think Sean Porter, with his toughness, his tenacity, his solidness, his strength, I think he's going to give Berto a good fight. And I think he's eventually going to wear Berto down, possibly stop him, but it's probably going to go all 12 and Sean Porter wins. And that gets him into another big fight. And honestly, Porter deserves it. He's been sitting on his ass since that great fight with Keith Thurman that he had last year, but that's not his fault. He's wanted to fight. But by the time this fight happens, he will have been out of the ring for over a year. Still, with all that inactivity, you got to favor him to beat Andre Berto. Again, I don't love this card. It's at Barclays in Brooklyn. I think, look, Berto's from, I think, Florida, and he's based out west. I think in Vegas he trains. Sean Porter's from Ohio, but he trains out in Vegas as well. And these two guys are fighting in Brooklyn. Doesn't make a lot of sense. I think they need a strong co-feature to this card, but I think they'll get that. I think that with all the guys in the PBC stable, they're going to get a good co-feature. This might even turn into a triple header. And down the line, I think this will turn into a solid card for Showtime. So again, Showtime continues to kick HBO's ass. Now, the fight last weekend, the big card, the Showtime Boxing on CBS card. Some ratings information's coming out. Thurman Garcia did a 2.2 rating. That's according to Nielsen data, and I don't know exactly how. I'm not going to get into all the semantics and all the nuance there, okay? But here's what you need to know. A 2.2 rating, the Thurman Porter fight I talked about last June did a 1.8 rating. So they actually went up from that fight to this fight. And that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to build, right? So I think that that's good. Now, I've seen some data that says, let's see. Oh, well, let me mention this. About 3.2 million people watched Ransom, which is a show on CBS that airs from 8 to 9 p.m. on Saturdays. I don't know what the hell Ransom is. I think it's I don't think it's a sitcom. I think it's like a serious show. That had 3.2 million people watching. What I've seen is that 2.7 million people were watching the PBC on CBS broadcast between 9 and 10 p.m. So 500,000 people dropped off. But here's the thing. The following hour, I think from 10 to 11, there were 3.3 million people at the peak watching the PBC on CBS card. So there was a slight dip after that show, that Ransom show, but towards the main event, it peaked, and it actually was higher than the Ransom show. So all in all, I think that's a good, solid rating. It won in the 18 to 49-year-old demo, which is the young demo that boxing is trying to attract, because too often it attracts, 50 and older, and it wins in that demo, but not the young demo, and that's who PBC is going after. So all things considered, look, there was a UFC pay-per-view that night. There was an NBA game going on, and the PBC show did a better rating than the NBA game, I believe. I think there was an NHL game. So all things considered, a good rating. On top of that, sellout crowd, 16,533 to see that fight. I don't know if there was any papering going on. I know that there were slashes and discounted tickets. Either way, the crowd was passionate. So I do think most of the people there paid for their tickets. Good crowd for that fight, man. So all in all, I think that Thurman Garcia was a commercial success. The fight itself, we'll talk about that in a second. Let's get into the review of last week's action. So let's go right back into it. The PBC on CBS show. I'll start quickly with the co-feature where Erickson Lubin scores a 4th-round knockout over Jorge Cota. This was a WBC title eliminator for the 154-pound title that Jermell Charlo currently holds, which he will defend this weekend. I'll talk more about that in a little bit. So Erickson Lubin, 21 years old, 18-0, 13 knockouts, looked really, really great, highlight reel knockout. And I want to make a point that in the post-fight interview, in that big moment in front of a big sellout crowd off of the adrenaline rush of almost decapitating this guy, Cota, I thought he handled that moment very well for being such a young guy. I know there are a lot of other fighters out there that would have talked trash. They would have said a bunch of ignorant bullshit. Erickson Lubin handled that moment with poise and class. He seemed like a veteran. So I like this kid. I think he's marketable. He has a maturity about him. He's comfortable in front of the camera. There were no uhs and there was no pauses or anything. He spoke clearly. I think that he's very, very marketable and there's a lot of potential. However, he is not ready for Jermell Charlo. Not ready. Jermell Charlo is seen as the lesser of the two Charlo brothers, but unless the people in the Lubin camp have heard some whispers about, look, Jermall Charlo, the other one, he's already moved up to 160 pounds because he couldn't make 154. He's busting at the seams, right? If they're hearing the same thing about Jermell and they think that maybe they can drain him or something like that, or he'll drain himself. If he looks sluggish in this fight this Saturday, maybe Lubin and his people go for it. It wouldn't be the worst thing on earth. But if Jermell Charlo looks good, makes weight easily, and wants to stay at 154, and I'm Erickson Lubin's people, I don't rush him into that fight. He's only 21 years old. Let the kid have some more seasoning. Yes, he scored a huge win here, but he was fighting a guy that was tailor-made for him, and the fight didn't prove much other than he can punch. Okay, we know that, but let's build this guy up. Let's see him go some rounds. Let's see him take some heat. Let's see him have to make adjustments before we put him in a title fight. Also on the undercard, Andres Fonfara came from behind to score a 10th round knockout over Chad Dawson. Fonfara didn't look great, but he got back in the win column, and he showed that he still has power late in the fight. Exciting fighter. There's a lot to like there. So he's back in the picture at 175. For Chad Dawson, he's just never been the same after killing himself to make the weight for that fight against Andre Ward years ago. Never been the same since. And he needs to retire. He needs to hang him up. At his best, he would outbox a guy like Fonfara almost in a shutout type way. Remember, he did that against Tomas Adamek He got dropped in that fight. He was always a guy that could get hit and be hurt, especially later in fights. But he was able to finish that fight on his feet, right? At this point, man, he's done. There's no reason for him to keep fighting. Also undefeated prospects, Sergey Lipinets and Heather Hardy, female fighter. Both of them stay undefeated with solid wins for them and continue to build. So let's talk about this main event. Keith Thurman wins a split decision over Danny Garcia. He unifies the WBC and WBA titles. I don't think this was a split decision. I did a guest spot on the Tail of the Tape boxing podcast with Vince Cummings and Kenny Keith, and we did a whole breakdown of this fight. So find those guys on Twitter. Find that Tail of the Tape podcast. It's a lot of fun, and those guys do really, really good work. And we talked about that fight for about an hour or so. So we talk about all the details. I'm not going to go that far into it here. I'm just going to say this much. I thought Keith Thurman clearly won this fight. And there's people on Twitter, and some of these people are media, which is really sad, really, really sad, saying, oh man, Danny Garcia got ripped off. And I don't know if it's a political allegiance thing. I don't know if it's because Angel Garcia, Danny's father, talked shit after the fight and played it up saying, I'm disgusted with boxing. Danny should retire from boxing. This is a travesty. My son won the fight. I don't know if that's what it's about. But guys, Danny Garcia didn't win the damn fight. He didn't do anything. He probably won the last couple rounds. You can make that argument because Keith Thurman got on his bike. He moved, but here's the thing. Keith Thurman still threw more punches and outlanded Garcia, and I want to say 2 or 3 of those late rounds. As a matter of fact, Keith Thurman outlanded Danny Garcia in 9 of the 12 rounds. He threw more punches in 10 of the 12 rounds. He landed the harder shots, including the shot in the first round that probably buzzed Danny Garcia. It at least got his attention enough to make him tentative and lay back on his back foot. And when he would throw counter punches throughout the fight, he wasn't turning over on him. He wasn't putting any weight on his front foot when he turned over on the hook. He was staying on the back foot, so there was no heat on him. Keith Thurman wins this fight, unifies the titles, right? I don't care. Showtime did a poll on Twitter. Who do you think won the fight? 21% of people thought Danny Garcia won. That shows you right there. I don't want to bash PBC and turn into a, fuck PBC, but that tells you the types of fan base that they're marketing to, okay? Because diehard fight fans, people who actually watch this sport on a regular basis and know how to properly score a fight, do not think Danny Garcia won that fight. For more than 1/5 of the PBC fan base to vote in that poll and say Danny Garcia won. I'm not saying that they didn't say it was a draw. They said he won. 21% of people that watched that voted in that poll are morons. They have no idea what they're watching. What happens from here for Keith Thurman? He made $2 million for this fight. So did Danny Garcia. And now I mentioned he has the WBA and WBC title, right? So Lamont Peterson a week ago won the WBC regular title. So at some point, you'd have to think that Lamont Peterson and Keith Thurman have to fight. I don't love that fight. I think it's going to be boring and dull. But I think that Peterson can do some things in there that Garcia maybe couldn't do. He's flat-footed like Garcia. Doesn't probably hit as hard as Garcia, but I think he'll be more active and I think he'll come forward more. And I think that he'll throw and land more punches than Garcia. So maybe it'll be a slightly better fight. But I just think that Thurman's on another level. And Thurman can actually knock out Peterson because Peterson doesn't have the chin Garcia has. If those two are going to fight, how about they fight this summer? How about in June, July? Let them fight then. Maybe even August, whatever. And clear up that situation with the WBA. And then in the fall, in October, November, let's see Keith Thurman fight the winner between Kell Brook and Errol Spence. As I mentioned before, Showtime just bought into that card, right? They're going to air that fight. You think they're doing that just for the hell of it? They're doing that because eventually they want to match the winner of that fight with Keith Thurman. It only makes sense, right? especially if it's Errol Spence. But even if it's Kell Brook and Keith Thurman's willing to travel over to the UK, that's a monster event over there. Monster event, okay? That goes to the O2 Arena, the whole nine. So I'd love to see that. I talked about Manny Pacquiao earlier in this episode. He wants to fight in the summer, and then he wants to fight in November. Look, if Keith Thurman wants to fight Lamont Peterson in the summer, when Manny Pacquiao is fighting whoever the hell he's going to fight, and if they can negotiate a fight between Pacquiao and Thurman, should they be successful in their summer fights, that's a huge fight, and I'd like to see it. Now look, Keith Thurman has a ton of fundamental flaws, right? He looked so sloppy in this fight, and there was a ton of missed punches. This was a good fight, a pretty good fight in the respect that there was some tense moments. There was some heated exchanges. It was unifying titles. It was 2 O's and one of them had to go. It was a sellout crowd, all of those factors. But this wasn't a very good fight. It wasn't a great fight. For those of you comparing it to when Oscar De La Hoya fought Felix Trinidad, no, it doesn't compare. It doesn't compare because neither of these two guys are as good as those two. And the decision, I thought, was much more clear in this fight even. I thought Keith Thurman was just the clear winner. The moving he did at the end of the fight, where maybe he gave away the last couple rounds, he had such a big lead built up that if he dropped 10, 11, and 12, those 3 rounds, he still would win 115, 113 on my card. So that's what I want to see Thurman do next. He fought once last year. He's been fighting twice a year, the typical Al Heyman type of thing, right? Let's see him fight twice more this year. Let's see him really get active. I tweeted out this weekend, I think Keith Thurman would be one of those guys who would benefit greatly from relocating to the Los Angeles area, or at least training out here at one of these gyms out here. The gym scene in Los Angeles is the best in the world. Not even close. No gym scene in the world comes close to what's happening right here in Los Angeles right now. Why do you think I live here? It's one of the reasons I'm here, because the boxing scene is here, right? This is the place. It is the mecca for boxing in North America. And I get it from a commercial standpoint. There are other markets doing big business, like London, Tokyo, Germany does a lot, right? Russia, there's a lot of markets that do big business in boxing. Bigger than the LA maybe. But the sparring here, the training here, there are over 100 gyms in the Los Angeles area where people train. Over 100. Keith Thurman's fundamentals are so bad. His head goes past his front foot so often. He's powerful, he's fast, he's athletic. He could get away with it at a certain level. But ask yourself, the punches that Danny Garcia was landing in that fight, some of those counter shots, if Manny Pacquiao or Kell Brook or Errol Spence are landing those punches, does Keith Thurman finish the fight on his feet? One last note on the Keith Thurman-Danny Garcia fight. I've seen some stuff going back and forth on social media saying that Keith Thurman is now a pound-for-pound level fighter. No. He's on the bubble, okay? He is on the bubble. If you want to have him at number 10, I can live with that. But I didn't see anything in that fight that said elite-level fighter to me. Now, the pound-for-pound list is going in this fluctuation. The top 5 guys is pretty solid, and then after that, it gets a little fuzzy. So again, you want to put him at the very bottom, number 10, okay. But I didn't see anything that made me think, wow, the winner of this fight's a Hall of Famer. That's not what I saw Saturday night. Speaking of flailing punches and missing a lot, over in the O2 Arena in London, Tony Bellew scores a TKO in the 11th round over David Haye in a fight that just turned into a freak show. It was a freak show from the moment it was signed, and we knew it was going to happen. I did a rant video last year. It might have been, I can't remember how many months ago, 6 months ago or something. I did a rant video when Bellew beat BJ Flores and was talking trash to David Haye. And I just saw the setup there. I know the way Eddie Hearn works. He's the best promoter in the business. And I knew right then and there that this fight was going to be made. And I knew it would be a goddamn freak show. And it was. during the press conferences, these guys were throwing chairs or I think throwing tables. They were, yelling and screaming, and they did their job and promoted the fight. And from all accounts, they did a big, big crowd over there. I'm sure the TV rating was big, or the buy rate, I should say, was big. Here in America, we didn't have it on TV, so you had to stream it, but there was all kinds of streams. And Facebook Live has made pay-per-view just shake in their boots, because I went on Facebook and I saw 5 or 6 different chat rooms, boxing chat rooms, showing this fight. Just a guy who ordered the pay-per-view overseas, showing the fight on his cell phone, just bloop, showing the fight. And I could pull it up on my phone and I could map that over to my TV and just watch the fight. So pretty amazing. But anyway, okay, David Haye started out really sloppy, throwing punches that were wider than Deontay Wilder's windmill punches a few weeks back against Gerald Washington. Seriously. He ruptured his Achilles in the 6th round. He was knocked down in that same round and knocked down in the 7th. And then he went on to fight a few more rounds, bravely. And Tony Bellew didn't get overly anxious, didn't dive in there and do anything stupid, because the few times he did kind of lunge in, Haye popped him, and it was enough to keep Bellew cautious. That being said, I'm David Haye, right? I want to keep weight off of this right ankle, right? He was putting a lot of his weight here on the front foot, so he couldn't, pull back and really torque that straight right hand. Now, where David Haye screwed up is by not throwing left hooks, but keep trying to land a haymaker right hand when you can't push off on it. That was pretty stupid. He should have feinted with the right and tried with a left hook or an uppercut, but that's another story. It was obvious that Haye was trying to lean on that front foot, that left foot, right, and keep weight off the right foot. And he was trying to move back this way to his left to keep that weight off that right ankle, that right heel. If Tony Bellew knew how to cut the ring off, if he was able to get to David Haye's left and cut him off and force David Haye to pull back like this, he would have constantly been putting weight on that right ankle. But Tony Bellew didn't cut the ring off. Tony Bellew couldn't cut the ring off and pressure a guy who had one fucking foot. And he didn't have the wherewithal. I'm not saying David Haye was running. He couldn't run. He had one foot. He was leaning on the ropes. But if Bellew moved to Haye's left shoulder and pushed, even got inside on him and leaned on him and pushed on that left shoulder and put weight on that right ankle, he could have got the fight stopped a lot sooner. So I don't know if Bellew was just having fun in there, if because of the animosity going back and forth, he just wanted to land some shots and knock him out cleanly. I don't know. But I thought he could have ended the fight a lot sooner had he put pressure and known how to cut the ring off better. Neither of these guys are very fundamentally good, right? But Bellew gets the win, scores a big upset victory here. And now he's got options. He talked about after this fight, my kid's future is secured. This is about finances. I got him. This is all good. But he also called out Deontay Wilder, which is interesting. I don't know, man. Deontay Wilder doesn't like taking big challenges. He's pretty much fought a bunch of nobodies his entire career. At this point, I think Wilder would maybe take that fight. And I think Wilder would actually travel over to the UK to do it, especially if Eddie Hearn, who's ponied up cash before to get PBC guys over there, ponied up the dough. I think it could do a big crowd over there. I think that the lead up to it, the promotion would be big over there. I think they could do a lot of business. So I wouldn't count that out. Now, it should be said that Deontay Wilder will decapitate Tony Bellew. Even though Wilder's fundamentals are shit, he's bigger, stronger, faster, and maybe even more technically sound than Bellew. Yeah, I said it. Sorry, guys. I know some of you are going to be mad at me saying that, but I think Bellew would win some early rounds boxing the way Gerald Washington did a few weeks ago, but man, that first right hand, good night. That'd be fun while it lasted, though. But Bellew might want to go for a domestic level opponent. Look, he talked about Anthony Joshua. No. Stay away from Anthony Joshua. Should Joshua beat Vladimir Klitschko in April? Stay away. Stay away from Klitschko. Should he win that fight? Stay away. But Dillian Whyte, not very good fundamentally. Big and strong, could take a shot and could land a shot. But Bellew might be able to outbox him and kind of do what he did to David Haye for the most part. So that could be a fun domestic level fight that brings a lot of money. If Tyson Fury, who apparently is finally going to have his hearing with UCAD next month, if he finally gets back into the ring, could you imagine that promotion? Tyson Fury and Tony Bellew? And that would be, from a purist perspective, for the quote-unquote lineal heavyweight championship. I think it'd be a crock of shit. I wouldn't recognize that championship, but there would be people out there who would recognize it. So Bellew has options, man. For David Haye, I don't get the love affair some people have with this guy. He's one of those fighters that I just never thought was that great. I saw tweets. Oh man, if David Haye just took his training seriously, because man, all that talent, all that potential. Guys, I don't know what you were seeing. There's so much smoke and mirrors. I've said it a million times. He was briefly the legitimate cruiserweight champion. But did he even hold that lineal, undisputed, unified championship for more than a year? I think he had 2 fights. I think he had, Mormec, and then Macarinelli, and then poof, he was up to heavyweight. So it's not like he set a precedent there, right? And then at heavyweight, his best win was probably Derek Chisora. You could argue as Nikolai Valuev if you rate Valuev, I guess just because of the size, but that was such a god-awful fight. And you can make an argument that was a draw, just going back, I don't think, the punch numbers were so horrible in that fight. I think that Valuev did pretty much nothing and Haye did maybe just a little more. But his signature win, his signature moment as a heavyweight is dominating Derek Chisora, a guy who was beat already by Tyson Fury back when they were really just prospects, right? So I just think that if that's your signature accomplishment as a heavyweight, that says a lot. So for David Haye at this point, ruptured Achilles, that's really hard to come back from. I think that his career is over. I think it's been over for a while. This was him talking himself into another money fight. Real quick with the injuries. David Haye has had certain types of injuries that are very consistent with weightlifters and very consistent with dopers. Now, I'm not casting aspersions. He's never failed a drug test in his life, okay? But he's never done VADA testing. I don't know if he's ever been seriously tested, Olympic-style drug testing, at least in the past few years. Again, just putting it out there. Maybe he's as clean as can be, and he just does too much weightlifting. He certainly has that physique. But the types of injuries he has are not consistent with boxing injuries. How many boxers do you know that rupture an Achilles tendon in the 6th round of a fight when they weren't moving much? It just, I don't know, man. It doesn't look good. But also on this card, Lee Selby, O'Hara Davies, and Katie Taylor all get stoppage wins in undercard fights. Paulie Malignaggi loses 8th round KO, clean KO by Sam Eggington. I think it was a body shot. And then a few days later announces his retirement. Look, we talk a lot about Paulie Malignaggi. He gets a lot of criticism for some of the political lines he's towed in recent years, and some of the double standards, and just some of the ways he's talked about other fighters that I don't approve of, and some of his scoring of fights that I think are god-awful. But 19 years in boxing, almost 20 years, almost 2 decades in boxing, amateur and pro. For a guy who never really had good power, I thought he carved out a very, very good career for himself. He did very, very well as a pro. He won a couple of titles. Some of them were paper, some of them were legit. He put up some good, strong, brave performances against guys like Miguel Cotto, who I think is a first ballot Hall of Famer. That was a fight where Paulie broke his jaw and kept fighting. That's back when I used to really like Paulie Malignaggi. It's changed over the years, okay. But his accomplishments in boxing are very, very good. And he does a good job commentating for the most part. I don't agree with some of the political stuff, the lines he toes. He's kind of a corporate man in some ways. He's kind of become that. And I don't agree with that. But you can't knock the guy. You can't take nothing away from him for what he's accomplished in the sport. So, Paulie, I wish you well in retirement. Congrats. Let's preview this week's action. So Friday night, we got some fights here in Los Angeles. It's LA Fight Club. Those are always streamed on the Golden Boy Promotions YouTube page, so be sure to check those out. That's headlined by Christian Chimpa Gonzalez, who's a good-looking prospect based here in the LA area. And then in Detroit, at the MGM Grand Casino and Hotel in Detroit, it's a ShoBox card. Claressa Shields, with her second professional fight, is on that card, so be sure to check that out. Saturday, there's a lot of boxing all around the world. I'll just briefly go over some of the stuff happening all over the place. In Australia, Michael Katsidis, remember him? He did not fight, he hasn't fought in 2 years actually. He's making a little comeback, an 8-rounder at 140 pounds. He was a fun lightweight, made for some really, really fun fights back in the day. In Hong Kong, 115-pound prospect Rex So, who's 20-0 with 12 knockouts, he's headlining a card. In Germany, Demetrius Andrade is fighting Jack Culcay for his WBA 154-pound title. Now, I'll talk a little bit about this one. This is basically a way to get Andrade a title, right? Culcay is a guy who was born in Ecuador, fights in Germany. He won an interim WBA title last April against Jean Carlos Prada, a Venezuelan fighter who's fought nobody. In fact, Prada went on to be knocked out in 2 rounds in his very next fight after dropping that fight to Culcay. So Culcay wins the interim title last April, does nothing since, gets bumped up to full titleist, and now he's about to hand that over to Andrade. Andrade went pro in 2008. That's almost a decade ago. Almost a decade ago. Doesn't have many fights, man. 1 fight in 2014, 1 in 2015, 1 in 2016. He needs at least 3 fights this year. At least 3 fights this year. So when he grabs this title off of Culcay, he needs to be back in the ring at earliest June of this year. He's just been sitting on the shelf. He's had promotional issues. There's been some injuries. He's made one bad business decision after another, and now he's going to have to play catch up. This is a chance for him to grab a title, and then he does a ton of talking. It's going to be time for him to start walking the walk, getting active, and he can start by unifying titles this summer with other fighters in his weight class who politically, making unification fights with them should not be difficult. Here's what's crazy about this fight, okay? Real quick, I'll beat up on sanctioning bodies some more here in this episode. Andrade's last fight was a 12th round TKO over Willie Nelson. That was last June. That was a WBC title eliminator. The same WBC 154-pound title that Jermell Charlo holds, that he is defending this Saturday against Charles Hatley. More about that in a second. WBC title eliminator in June. Here we are in March. Why isn't Andrade fighting Charlo for that WBC title? He won an eliminator. Charlo's fighting somebody else, a guy who didn't fight at all last year. The sanctioning body craziness, and fans wonder. So I want to talk about that Charlo fight. Charlo, this is in Maryland. Jermell Charlo's defending that title, that junior middleweight WBC title against Charles Hatley, a guy who last fought in 2015 when he scored an 11th round upset win over Anthony Mundine, and that was for the WBC silver title. So guy doesn't fight in an entire year. It's been almost a year and a half, I think, since he fought, and now he's going to fight Charlo for this title. Doesn't make any goddamn sense, but that's what's going on. Also on that card, Gary Russell Jr. is fighting Oscar Escandón, a tough Colombian who only has 2 losses, and they were both split decisions. Now, here's the thing. I think this fight, on paper, it looks like Gary Russell is going to just dominate Escandón, right? And just box circles around him. It's not even going to be close. But here's the thing. Russell is a guy who relies on speed, slickness, movement. He only fought once last year, and that was in April, and it was 2 rounds. He only fought once in 2015, and that was 4 rounds. So this guy has boxed exactly 6 rounds the last 2 years. Now, it should be noted that Escondona's only fought once in 2015 and once in 2016 as well. But he doesn't rely on quickness and speed and reflexes. That's not his style. I've actually been to a couple of this guy's fights. He's fought out here in Cali a few times. Rough, rugged kind of guy who goes rounds. And I think Russell, he's still a favorite in this fight, but don't be surprised if he gets a real push from Escandona in this fight, man. Another fight's in Ghana. Richard Comey, who's a Ghana native, lost 2 straight split decisions in 2016. 2 tough fights against Robert Easter, Denis Shafikov. He's making his comeback in Ghana. I still like him as a lightweight, man. I still think he's a top lightweight. But obviously the big card this weekend is in Verona, New York, and this is a fight that HBO needed badly because, as I talked about before, they're getting destroyed by Showtime. So, good main event. Talk about that in a second. But this co-feature sucks. It sucks. I'm not excited about it. Yuriorkis Gamboa is going up against Rene Alvarado. Remember Yuriorkis Gamboa? Remember him? Here's another guy who's made a ton of horrible business decisions. And even though he's now signed with Golden Boy Promotions, he's still giving money to 50 Cent. He's still giving 50 Cent to 50 Cent because he still has promotional options on him. That's the way the contract worked out. So this guy owes people money that he hasn't even spent yet. Gamboa did not fight in 2016. In fact, he's only had 5 fights since 2012. So at this point, does he love boxing? Is he doing this because this is all he knows how to do and he really, really loves it and he wants to get back in it? Or is he doing this because he owes a lot of people money and he needs a paycheck? We'll find out Saturday. I think it's the latter. Now, Rene Alvarado's perfect matchmaking for Gamboa. He's lost 5 of his last 9 fights. 4 and 5 in his last 9 fights, which are all between 126 and 130 pounds. He's a rough, rugged guy that goes rounds. He just scored a split decision win over a good Puerto Rican fighter, Jason Velez, late last year. I think that he'll give Gamboa rounds, but this is a 135-pound fight. So I think that this is set up for Gamboa to work off some rust, get some rounds in. He's going to take a few punches from a guy who doesn't punch that hard, but it's going to look good to the novice fan, and then Gamboa gets a late stoppage. It's set up that way. This is old school boxing matchmaking 101. Speaking of matchmaking, the main event, David Lemieux. I always want to say Lemieux, but apparently I'm supposed to say David Lemieux. Is going up against Curtis Stevens in a fight that haters are viewing as a battle of Triple G victims, Triple G leftovers, because Curtis lost to Triple G in 2013 and Lemieux lost to him in 2015. So this fight sucks. But anyone saying that is stupid and they're not a real boxing fan. These are both 2 top 10 middleweights, and if you know anything about their style and their history, this should be bombs away. This should be a lot of fun. Now, I preface that, but I have to say, Lemieux's last fight in October last year, he went 20 rounds against Christian Fabian Rios in a rather uninspiring performance up in Canada. Curtis Stevens, his last fight, November of 2016, he went all 10 rounds with James De La Rosa in a rather uninspiring fight. So, which guy are we going to get here? Are we going to get the exciting, come forward, stalking David Lemieux and Curtis Stevens, or are we going to get the uninspired guy who's just collecting a check? The one warning I would say for those of you telling all your friends who watch MMA and your casual fight fan friends to watch this as a guaranteed can't miss action fight. We've seen matchups like this before that were can't miss fight of the year candidate on paper that didn't quite live up to expectations, right? Matisse Provodnikov comes to mind. I think we're going to see that. I think for the first few rounds in this fight, these guys are actually going to be a little tentative and feel each other out. I do think, though, that once the first punch lands, it will open up and it will be pretty exciting. And I think there's no way this thing can go the entire distance, right? All things being considered, if both guys are at their best, I favor David Lemieux because he can punch with both hands. He has more offensive variety. Curtis Stevens is all one shot. And if you stay out of the way of that, because he telegraphs it, if you stay out of the way of that and you use a jab, which Lemieux actually has, it's not a great jab, but he actually has one, you're okay if you face Curtis Stevens and you stay out of the way of that big right. So I like Lemieux here by mid to late rounds TKO in a fight that starts kind of underwhelming, but heats up and finishes with a bang. That's what I think we're going to see. Let me know what you guys think. Like, share, subscribe. Let me know what you think about the intro and what I need to do with that. It's a work in progress, and I'll see you at the fights.